W City News Time, 9 o'clock.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 16 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We are expecting new COVID-19 projections today, just hours ahead of the province entering step one of this reopening. Here's City News reporter Laura Carney.
It's been 3 weeks since we got COVID-19 projections. At that time, daily case counts were still in the 2000s, but the modeling showed that maintaining progress with vaccinations and maintaining some public health measures until mid-June could help ensure a good summer. So here we are, almost mid-June, and we are getting ready to enter step one of reopening. It will see patios allowed to reopen, as well as some retail stores starting at 12:01 tomorrow morning. The Delta variant likely to be discussed a lot when the projections are released this afternoon. On Monday, Associate Medical Officer of Health Dr. Barbara Yaffe said this variant, first identified in India, is expected to become the dominant strain in this province, and one COVID-19 vaccine dose is not as effective against the Delta variant as two. I'm Laura Carney.
City News Time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a fresher feeling wind for us today out of the east-northeast. Lots of sunshine. Our high 25 degrees tonight, mainly cloudy and 13. And tomorrow, slight chance of showers, otherwise mainly cloudy, 23. For today, the high 25.
Right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 16 degrees. At least one Ottawa bar, and likely many more, will open at 1 minute after midnight tonight. Provincial restrictions on patios will be lifted as of that time. The Lafayette in the market says it's planning on serving. There will be a 2-hour window, of course, because liquor laws say you have to stop serving at 2. The city is reminding bars and those who want to hit a patio, though, they still have responsibilities. No more than 4 people at a table. There are a number of restrictions. Total number of people on a patio does depend on the size of the patio itself, but tables do have to be a couple of meters apart. The legislature just closed up for the summer, but it reopens today. The government is set to introduce legislation at Queen's Park to invoke the notwithstanding clause.
The proposed legislation would allow the governing Progressive Conservatives to restore changes to election finance law. MPPs will be recalled from their summer break to allow the bill to be introduced. The notwithstanding clause gives provincial legislatures or Parliament the ability to override certain portions of the charter for a 5-year term. On Tuesday, Ontario Superior Court Justice Edward Morgan ruled that it was unnecessary to amend the Election Finances Act to extend the restricted pre-election spending period to 12 months. Blake Lambert, The Canadian Press, Toronto.
City News Time, 9:03. The dry spring so far has led the municipality of Mississippi Mills to issue a statement on water levels. Based on criteria from the Ontario Low Water Response Program, both the Mississippi and Carp River watersheds are on the threshold of a minor drought. It warns as the dry weather continues, drought conditions expected to extend into the summer months with water flow and levels both decreasing. Low rainfall amounts through April and May expected to continue with below average precipitation for the rest of this month, in fact, into July. The Conservation Authority is asking anyone not on the Ottawa water system but in that Mississippi area to reduce their water consumption by 10%. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrives in Cornwall, England today for a 3-day gathering with G7 leaders. Ending the COVID-19 pandemic, a global economic recovery that includes international travel, and getting vaccines to poorer countries are key items on the agenda. After the summit, Trudeau will then travel to Brussels for a NATO summit, followed by a meeting between Canada and the EU. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Oh, what a day, what a day, what a day. Big day in the news game. You're into the news. You like to share your views on the news. Oh, have you come to the right place? Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We're heavy duty into Ontario politics. Heavy duty into charter rights this morning. I mean, that's the theme. I mean, that's basically the theme for almost the entire morning. We have Ontario politics on a collision course with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All brought to you by Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Working Families Coalition. You remember the Working Families Coalition? This is the Working Families Coalition at work.
Tim Hudak talks the talk about getting Ontario working. But in our community, he's cutting an estimated 11,100 workers, boosting local unemployment by 1.9%. 1 in 6 public sector jobs lost, many in healthcare and education. Is that really the way to get Ottawa working? Our family, our friends, our community are all at risk. Can we really trust Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs? Authorized by Working Families.
So this is a huge story. Huge story. The Ontario legislature is being recalled. It was not supposed to be in session this week, but they're being called back to Queen's Park today. I was looking at the calendar for today. It says that the legislature is supposed to begin its session 3:00 this afternoon, and it's about the notwithstanding clause. Nothing says fun like the notwithstanding clause. And a recent court ruling that, well, it didn't go the way the Ford government was hoping it would. All about election spending by so-called third parties, like the Working Families Coalition. You know, in Canadian politics, we have this term, third parties, very generic term, third parties. I don't know why we use that term in Canada, third parties. Let's call them what they are. In effect, what they really are, they're deep-pocketed special interest groups. They're special interest groups. You could even call them super PACs, U.S.-style super PACs. So we're all over this story. It's going to take up much of the morning here on the Rob Snow Show. You know why? Because it's a big deal. Okay? It's a big deal for a number of reasons. It's a big deal because whenever any government moves to override, set aside a ruling from a court, that's a big deal. It's a big deal because anytime any government invokes the notwithstanding clause, that's a big deal because that means the government of the day is saying to all of us, all the regular little people, we really don't care what it says in the earlier sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We prefer Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the notwithstanding clause. And all of those other precious charter rights that you thought you had, well, you don't really have them. And you're not going to have them for the next 5 years. And it's a big deal because, we don't really care what that judge said. We're doing our own thing. So, like I said, it's kind of a big deal. And in this case, it's about ad spending, election ads. David's going to play another one for us here. Anti-conservative election attack ads like this one from the Working Families Coalition. Roll tape.
Imagine this. You get your pink slip thanks to Tim Hudak. Your family is devastated. Your friends in shock.
Memories.
Your future's in doubt. No money coming in for mortgage, tuition,
Destitute.
taxes. Now, multiply that by 100,000. Communities across Ontario will pay the price for Hudak's plan to give tax breaks to big business.
Hudak bad.
Can we really trust Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs?
Can't trust him.
Authorized by Working Families.
Yeah, the Working Families Coalition, the usual thorn in the side of the PC Party of Ontario. The Working Families Coalition, make no mistake, is a deep-pocketed mega fundraising group for the union movement in Ontario. It is the biggest of big labor. It exists only to take money from the biggest labor unions in Ontario and then turn around and spend it on ads like that one to defeat conservatives in elections. It is the raison d'etre, okay? And here in this province, when Dalton McGuinty was the premier, when Kathleen Wynne was the premier, it used to be the Wild West with that kind of stuff. We did have super PAC politics in Ontario when it came to that sort of thing. And groups like the Working Families Coalition, they could spend and spend and spend, rank and file union members do spend it until they ran out of money. Back in 2014, those ads are from 2014, they were running a campaign of fear against Tim Hudak's PC party. That one group, okay, get a load of this one group, the Working Families Coalition, spent $2.5 million on election ads in 30 days. I was on the radio back then covering that election. Day in and day out, every commercial on the radio was an ad from the Working Families Coalition. Let's play another one. There was a lot of them at the time. Let's play another one here. Go ahead and play another one.
Tim Hudak's promise to create 1 million new jobs with corporate tax cuts is misleading at best. Ontario already has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in North America. So who wins with corporate tax cuts? Tim's business friends.
Yeah, big business.
Tell
evil.
Tim to keep his tax cuts and his part-time no-benefits minimum wage jobs. Get the goods on Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs at workingfamilies.ca.
30 days of that. 30 days of that. Non-stop blanketing the airwaves. $2.5 million, okay? And all of the unions combined, you take the trade unions, the teachers' unions, the nurses' union, they spent, during that 2014 campaign, I kept track of it, $9 million. $9 million in 30 days. So then, what happened? They turned on the Liberals. They turned on Kathleen Wynne. So what did Premier Kathleen Wynne do? She brought in spending limits for third parties, so they couldn't spend $9 million attacking Kathleen Wynne like they attacked Tim Hudak. And they cracked down, and they scaled back. They severely restricted the spending limits for those third parties, for the deep-pocketed special interests, all in the name of democracy? No, liberal self-preservation. But you know what happened in the last election? The Liberals got tossed. They became the minivan party. Premier Ford won the big majority. Welcome to Ford Nation. And Premier Ford went even further, extended the 6-month limit on ad spending to 12 months before the writ period for the election. And the working families took that to court, challenged it in court on a constitutional charter challenge, and the working families won. They were victorious. The working families argued that this limit infringed on the right to free expression in the charter, and they won. But, and this is where we are this morning on this, okay, because they made it about charter rights, well, what does that do? It brings the notwithstanding clause into play, because and some people, they're so ignorant on the charter, they don't realize the notwithstanding clause is part of the charter. Section 33 of the charter. Yeah, it's the nuclear option, and Doug Ford is going nuclear, so to speak. So he's going to use his majority government to invoke the notwithstanding clause for the first time in Ontario's history, and they're going to say, too bad, so sad, to the Working Families Coalition. He's going to say, I'm the premier, I have the majority government, and you know what? I have the notwithstanding clause thanks to people like Jean Chrétien, Roy McMurtry, and Roy Romano and the Kitchen Accord. Okay? And those spending limits, they're going to stay in place. Now, I actually think there should be spending limits on election attack ads by special interest groups. We had them for federal election campaigns, and I think they exist for a good reason. Because we don't want the rich, we don't want the powerful to have too much influence over election campaigns. Whether it's big labor, big business, or the billionaire class. That's why we need limits on election spending. Not all conservatives agree with me. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of how this is being done because I'm not a fan of the notwithstanding clause. I don't think there should be a notwithstanding clause. I think such a legislative override, like the notwithstanding clause, diminishes our fundamental human rights. So I like spending limits, but I don't like the method to the madness. Oh, and let me tell you, it's all kinds of madness. Make no mistake. A lot of people are mad at Doug Ford this morning. Andrea Horvath's Twitter, her latest tweet just says, OMG, Doug. That's all it's. OMG, Doug. OMG, Doug. We have all kinds of coverage of this story. I want you to share your opinions as well during the talkback hour. Comes up between 10 and 11 o'clock. That's our open line hour. We love hearing from you on the hot news stories of the day. None hotter than this one. If you ask me, we had Doug Ford, we got attack ads, we got Ford versus the unions, we got Ford versus the courts, we have the charter. It's all a very big deal. 750-1310, 750-1310. Email the Rob Snow Show, ottawa.citynews.ca. Coming right up, the man who has forgotten more about this issue than I have ever known, Duff Conacher from Democracy Watch on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, we had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew that we have to wait, and we knew that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Let's get right to our first guest, Duff Conacher, co-founder, Democracy Watch. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think of Doug Ford's power move?
It's undemocratic, unreasonable, and dictatorial, and likely illegal.
Okay, why do you say that?
Well, undemocratic because the democratic thing to do to establish reasonable democratic limits on third-party spending is to work with all parties and have an independent commission study what a reasonable democratic limit is. And instead, he's moving forward with using the notwithstanding clause, just going to impose it and defy a court ruling that the limits that he arbitrarily set with Bill 254 are unconstitutional, and there's a democratic, reasonable way to proceed on this. Limits are needed.
So you're not opposed to limits?
No, everyone testified, including all the unions, that this all seems to be aimed at. But every representative from the unions testified that limits are needed. They just have to be reasonable and democratic, and not just arbitrarily picked out of the air, which is what he did. The limit was $600,000 could be spent by any third-party interest group or individual in the 6 months before an election. And he said now the limit's going to apply, same dollar amount, about $600,000, but for the 12 months before an election, and it'll apply to any ad you do about anything, even if it's not related to the election, about any bill or government decision or action. And the courts across the country have ruled that that's illegal. That's a too restrictive rule on the right of freedom of expression. So everyone said the limits are legal and needed, but have to be set in a reasonable democratic way, not an arbitrary way. And that's what he's done. And now he's arbitrarily using the notwithstanding clause in a dictatorial way to say, no, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, including the courts. And I get to choose whatever the number is myself, like a dictator would, as opposed to working with other parties and having independent experts come up with what a reasonable democratic limit is, which could all be done in a few months. It doesn't take long. All you're studying is how much does it cost to reach voters?
Right.
And then...
Well, they just call you and ask you, Duff, right?
Call me? No. You'd have to, I'm not an expert in TV, radio advertising, social media advertising. But it wouldn't take long to do it. It could be done by September.
Right.
And then you introduce a bill setting the limits, which could go through very quickly and be in place 6 months before the next election, which is what the court said was a reasonable time period to be limiting this.
So what was the difference between this Ontario court ruling that ruled against Premier Ford's move and Harper v. Canada? Because
Harper's the challenge that former
because isn't that kind of the standard? Because that was the Supreme Court ruling after all, right?
It was the Supreme Court ruling, but the limits that Harper challenged before he became Prime Minister were limits that only applied during the election campaign period.
For the writ period.
That's right, and that limit is still in place in Ontario, because it was not challenged in this case. And that limit is $100,000 during the actual election, 5 or 6 week election campaign period. Mm-hmm. The limits that then the Win Liberals put in applied to the 6 months before the campaign period began. Mm-hmm. And they were challenged in court, but the unions didn't move the court case forward since the last election. And then Ford changed the limits again and extended it to 12 months before the election campaign period this spring, and that's when the case ended up going to court and moving forward quite quickly. So in BC, though, on limits that apply just for the 3 months before the election campaign period, the BC Court of Appeal said that's too long. It can't extend to when the legislature is open. It can't apply to any type of ad. It can only apply to ads that say vote for or vote against, because otherwise people are advertising about responding to government actions, and they're allowed to do that. Lobby groups are allowed to lobby, including by doing ad campaigns. And so, again, limits are needed. Everyone agrees with that. Just not arbitrarily set limits by coming out of the top of Doug Ford's head with no thought or reason.
Arbitrary in terms of both dollar figure and length of time that the limits are imposed, you're saying?
Yeah, the Liberals, when they set a $600,000 limit for 6 months, that was arbitrary as well, and the unions challenged it. Yeah. We just need a study. It wouldn't take long at all. You just call all TV and social media and radio ad experts and say, how much does it cost to run a campaign that will reach Ontario voters? Not convince them of, you don't want to allow anyone to spend as much so that they would be able to overwhelm everybody and drum it into their heads so long that they would all be convinced, because they wouldn't be allowed to think about anything else because it would be the only ad on TV. But just how much does it cost to reach voters with your message? whatever dollar figure that is, that's the limit.
You know, there are people who think it should be a free-for-all. And if I can forge a coalition of like-minded individuals and start, whatever you want, a political action committee or whatever, I should be able to spend whatever I want to spend. That getting a message across in a free democratic society shouldn't be exclusive to political parties. What do you think about that position? Yeah,
that's the U.S. Supreme Court's decision.
Yeah.
Although donations are limited in the U.S. and were limited back to the 70s, way before Canada limited them, other than in Quebec. So lots of people think, it's been a free-for-all down there all the time. No, they had donation limits and ban on corporate and union donations to parties and candidates for decades before Canada had it. But on spending limits for third parties, the U.S. has just taken the cap right off. And that's the libertarian view, that if you have money, you should be able to spend it to put forward your views. It wasn't unanimous at the Supreme Court. It was a split decision, 5-4.
Right.
And the Democrats right now are trying to reverse it with changes to the law, and try it in 2019 as well. So there is not a consensus down there on this at all in the U.S. The example I always use is that means if someone wins the lottery just before the election, they can spend all of that money and try to defeat a candidate who has a spending limit. The candidates in Ontario elections have a spending limit of between about $50,000 to $100,000 in their riding.
Depending on how many voters are in the riding, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so is it really fair to allow one voter? This is part of what's undemocratic about the current limit.
Yeah.
One voter is allowed to spend $600,000. A group that has 100,000 supporters and is representing them on issues is also allowed to spend $600,000. How is that a reasonable democratic limit, that one voter can spend as much as a group that represents 100,000 voters? So the limits are not democratic or reasonable now. The limit that the Liberals set was not reasonable and democratically set. They didn't do an independent study before choosing the figure of $600,000 over 6 months out of the air.
Right.
And that's what we need. We just need a study.
Okay.
And it would be issue by issue. On any one issue, you would be allowed to spend this amount. And then for campaigns that are for or against, in terms of saying vote for or against a party or a candidate, you would be able to spend a separate amount during the election campaign period. All we need is the study, and then it can be set reasonably. And instead,
it's too arbitrary.
It's just,
I understand.
Arbitrary, dictatorial, and likely illegal. You can't just use the. Lots of constitutional experts think you can't just use the notwithstanding clause whenever you want for whatever you want, and I think it will be challenged in court. I predict that the unions will challenge this.
Okay, very quickly, in 30 seconds or less, what is Democracy Watch's position on the notwithstanding clause? Generally, it was a compromise to get the charter through. Yeah,
and it shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't be there.
If something is illegal, unconstitutional, then it's unconstitutional. Why would we? Unconstitutional, but for 5 years, a premier can arbitrarily whip their members into voting in favor of removing this constitutional right for 5 years, and then renew it every 5 years. I mean, it's just. All I have to do is describe that process, and then you can hear it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Constitutional or not, we have rights or we don't.
Good one. Thank you, Duff Conacher.
Thanks very
much. Great pleasure this morning. The co-founder of Democracy Watch gets us going right out of the gate. 9:28, the 9:30 news coming right up. And then Ontario politics this week. This is City News.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 17 degrees. It's 18 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. First COVID modeling numbers from the province in about 3 weeks will be delivered today. COVID case numbers certainly on the steady decline. What do the stats say for the near future? Now, we can assume they're good, despite rising incidents of COVID variants, because step one of the Ontario reopening business takes effect at midnight tonight. Patios will once again be allowed to open, non-essential stores as well. Same thing, but there are capacity limits and COVID protocols that are still in place. Now, bars in Ottawa, we're hearing, plan on joining the opening for the early Friday morning libation. Hold back at Queen's Park, either in person or virtually. MPPs are back in session today. They'll deal with a specific piece of legislation. The PC government expected to invoke the notwithstanding clause and restore changes to the election finance law thrown out by the courts this week. A court hearing is scheduled today for the man accused of killing 4 members of the same family in London. Nathaniel Veltman charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 of attempted murder. Police say the attack with a truck was deliberate, hate-motivated, an act that targeted Muslims. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
It's time for Ontario Politics This Week with Lindsay, Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty, and Andrew Brander, senior consultant, Crestview strategy, former advisor to the Ford government. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rob.
How's everybody?
Good morning, Rob.
How's everyone?
Knee deep in another.
What do you want to talk about? What's top of mind for everybody?
Well, Rob.
Talk about the Leafs.
We can talk. We could talk about the fact that the province is opening tomorrow.
Yes.
We could talk about the fact that it's my birthday today. And
happy birthday, Andrew. Happy birthday.
And the province is opening tomorrow, so I think that's a great opportunity. But it also never ceases to amaze me that this government's ability to spoil every possible good news opportunity for them, and instead.
So, are they lighting the CN Tower in your honor, Andrew? Or
on a weekend when we should be talking about something else?
Right.
Looks like we're going to talk about something else.
So, does that mean you actually get to go somewhere, Andrew? And celebrate?
Fingers crossed. And my 3 closest friends will be able to enjoy a nice, refreshing beverage on a patio tomorrow.
Good for you. Good for you.
Supposed to still just be members of your household.
Okay, that's enough. We have serious stuff to get into. Premier Ford, in case you haven't heard, is going to invoke the notwithstanding clause to maintain spending limits by third parties in the lead up to an election and during the writ period. Lindsay Maskell, what do you think of the power move?
Well, it's interesting that he's, this is just such an impetuous sort of knee-jerk reaction to something. First of all, this legislation was something that is actually not an issue for that many people, right? So it's interesting that he needed to do this immediately, particularly considering that he has all of these other legislative and especially judicial options, because he didn't even appeal, right? So this was a ruling at a lower court.
Yeah.
He had a chance to appeal,
Sure.
and they're just taking the nuclear option immediately. And I find it really concerning because, of course, no matter what anybody's opinion is on third-party advertising and what the limits should be and how the time frames around third-party advertising, we should have a problem with provinces making it just sort of commonplace to use the notwithstanding clause. So I'm obviously very concerned about this. I sound very cynical, not to belittle Andrew's birthday, but I feel like the timing of this, of We've had a couple of really bad crisis situations that have upset people across all of Canada, particularly recently in London and with the residential schools, and, to move so quickly on something that doesn't have any kind of time pressure to it other than Ford's own agenda, and try to push it through today and then reopen the province tomorrow and hope that nobody really cares is a pretty interesting move. But I feel it also, it just has a lack of respect for both the legislative process, for the judicial process, and for Canadians' rights and freedom of speech. And we should be very concerned that provinces are wanting to increase their action. This is the first time this will ever be done in Ontario. He threatened it for the municipal campaign, which drove me into that campaign in 2018 when Jennifer Keys-Matt decided to run because of cutting Toronto City Council in half. And then in the end, a court overturned that decision, so he didn't use it. So instead of actually trying to appeal, he waited less than 24 hours to decide that he was, going nuclear. It should be very concerning to Ontarians.
From time to time, we will be taking trips down memory lane and playing some of the greatest hits from the Working Families Coalition, which started all of this. Got one for us, Dave? Yeah, let's go.
Do you remember when the Conservative Party fired provincial water inspectors and privatized testing that led to the Walkerton tragedy? They also fired meat and agricultural inspectors. Now, Ontario has a Clean Water Act and more inspectors to safeguard our food supply. But the Conservatives are still voting to reverse our progress, and that's what's at stake in this election.
That's an old one. That's a really old one. Okay, that's the Working Families Coalition. So, Andrew Brander, big power move from the Premier here, notwithstanding clause, first time in Ontario's history. What do you think of the move?
Yeah, look, I first of all, I'd like to reserve a bit of judgment just in the sense that we don't know exactly what they're planning to introduce, if it's the bill in its entirety, whether it's amended at all, if any consultations have happened with the opposition in the interim. And if they plan on applying the notwithstanding clause to simply the 5 provisions in Bill 254 that the Superior Court found to be unconstitutional, or if they're applying it to the whole bill. But, to Lindsay's point, look, Quebec uses the notwithstanding clause often to stand up for their provincial rights. And the fact that Ford isn't afraid to use it, to me, is a little bit refreshing. Section 33 is enshrined and is a tool given to the provinces in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So we don't have those freedoms without the notwithstanding clause. It's part of the Charter as a whole. In terms of the question on timing, my response to Lindsay would simply be, the legislature just rose last week. It's not a surprise that, politicians don't want to be hanging around Queen's Park all summer. This ruling, the timing of it's a little bit unfortunate in that sense. However, if he were not to address this in a quick and swift fashion, then you would be hearing ads, much like the one that you just played, throughout the entire summer. And so, I mean, if the question then is, is this sort of politically motivated, or does it? Does it help Ford?
Well, everything is politically motivated. We're talking about politics. Come on.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Yeah.
However, I do think this is the right thing to do. For far too long, elections have had an undue level of influence from outside third-party voices, and I think those need to be put in check.
Okay, on this question of haste, I want to dig in a little bit more. Lindsay makes the point, well, it could have appealed. It's a lower court ruling. when it comes to the fight on the carbon tax, for example, that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. I wonder if it's a question of, look, the election is less than a year away now, right? So they want to get it out of the way. That would be my guess. They don't have the time on this to wait, say, a year to hear from the Supreme Court, or 2 years or 3 years to hear from the Supreme Court on this. That's my guess. They just want to get it over with, get it done with, and hope, 8 or 9 months from now, it's not even an issue anymore. People are forgotten about it. They've moved on to other things. What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, the appeal in the City of Toronto case of cutting the number of seats in half in the middle of their election period, that stay that they received in their favor happened in 6 days. So this is actually, the tools available to the government are obviously the Attorney General can ask another level of court to hear this. They would accept it, and a ruling happened that quickly previously. So, I feel that, when Andrew said we don't know what's going to be introduced today, let me tell you, legislative drafters are not redoing an entire piece of legislation in under 24 hours. Right. So having worked there that long, you build in a lot of respect for the process and what's in place and how to use those tools. And it's just ignoring all of that. The timing of it, we are, I think we're at, 359 days until a set election. But, look, this piece of legislation has, people have different opinions on this about what time frame third parties should be allowed to have a voice. And a judge
some people don't think there should be any limits at all as well, right?
Yeah, so to be clear, I do think there should be limits. The limit is currently, I believe, 600,000. And 6 months before an election, it completely has to stop. But I think more than ever, people have to actually re-examine how they feel about this, because, as much as I might not have liked the conservative, ads, third-party ads that hurt some of our candidates, the thing that I do think we need to think about this now is, do groups like personal support workers get to have a voice in this election? And, that is 6 months before. The legislation took us that it used to be you couldn't communicate 6 months before an election. That was taking us to a whole year. And it didn't change the spending limits. But it also it was solving a bunch of little things that had never been an issue, had never been challenged, had not been raised with Elections Ontario as a problem in terms of vendors and other issues. So it also has it's a hammer solution for something that wasn't really that big of a problem, except for the fact that they are using an extreme tool to manipulate a situation for an election that they're running it.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
So
Okay.
It's a pretty shocking move.
Lindsay mentions third-party ads that may have hurt some of her party's candidates. Maybe an ad like this one, Lindsay.
New from Ontario Proud, the all-original Kathleen Wynne collection. You'll hear such Ontario Liberal Party greatest hits as the gas plant scandal, cash for access, e-health. Don't forget the Kathleen Wynne mega hit, skyrocketing hydro bills, and many more. Yes, 15 years of memories in one scandalously high-priced double LP and cassette. The Kathleen Wynne collection. And she's just getting started. Available wherever elections are held. A message from Ontario Proud.
Shag carpet, bell bottoms, platform shoes. I hear that. That's what goes through my mind. That's a great one. That's classic. Andrew, on the rush to get this done, what do you think about that? On the rush,
Yeah, I think this goes back to timing. Lindsay expanded there on the stay in terms of it being 6 days. 6 days a year out is clearly too long for the government to wait. Under this court decision, there would have been no limits, no disclosure, no caps on corporations, special interest groups, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the government's move is sending the clear signal today to them that they shouldn't be planning any kind of multi-million or dollar investments in some kind of new ad campaign in the coming weeks. So I think it's clarity in that sense, and I think they're leaving nothing up to chance by taking this route.
Okay, we'll be right back. Part 2. We'll get a little bit more into what the landscape used to be and whether we really want to go back to the time when there was no limit on third-party advertising in Ontario elections. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I wanted to give gifts to my volunteers, so I started making, I knew this is a skill I had, so I made chocolate that had a cultural based with a teaching, because culture here is not just a little part, it's the large part, it's the fundamental part of our organization. So then we started doing, just little programs, and we sell a few at a fair. And then we started getting contracts. People were starting to enjoy the chocolates, and started getting more and more contracts all across Canada. Then we decided to become a social enterprise, and we were able to create 2 jobs. And Val is one of our chocolatiers, very talented. We were able to help her with employment.
We started just with a little bit in the kitchen, doing a little bit of chocolate together, and next thing, it's just kind of taken off. And it's great, because I love to be creative, and we get to create a lot and make up stuff, and it's just I just love it. It's just great that we get to make money back for Wabano, and it's helping me out, and we're helping just everybody out, Wabano and everything.
We met a very socially conscious business owner being around town, and we decided to partner, because beans and chocolate, coffee and chocolate are sort of created the same way, and there's and they're very one origin bean, so it was a good pairing together. And it's been a fantastic partnership for both of us.
I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Purat, the head of Wabano Fine Chocolates, through a local networking group. And I was completely intrigued by the social enterprise that she was running, and then I looked at what we were doing, trying to support local business and supporting local communities, and it was a perfect match, and it's been fantastic ever since.
We make every batch by hand. We temper it by hand to get to the consistency it needs to be to make a good chocolate. And one of the best, also wonderful things we did, we've connected with Ed, with being around town, and our coffee bars have been amazing hit. So we're really excited about the connection with our coffee.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So I think one of the things that really thrust this to the forefront is actually many years ago when Tim Hudak was the leader of the Ontario PC Party. He was basically running for premier as the leader of the PC Party. And the Ontario PCs faced this avalanche of third-party spending from the Working Families Coalition. And every second ad was an ad that sounded like this one.
Ontario PCs and Tim Hudak have plans to radically cut our health care.
Radicals.
Thousands of healthcare jobs cut. Tax credits that help seniors stay in their home cut. And they'll change our healthcare services for the worse. Please oppose Tim Hudak and Ontario PCs.
So the Working Families Coalition, just during the RIP period of the 2014 campaign, spent $2.5 million. Okay, don't vote for Hudak. He's a bad man. Okay, vote for the Liberals. $2.5 million. So it was the biggest spender, but all the unions were into it with anti-conservative ads. $9 million altogether. Well, $8.7 million. Okay, $2.1 million from OECTA, $1.2 million from ETFO. And then ETFO turned around and gave the Working Families Coalition $750,000. So there was basically collusion. The nurses union spent $700,000 and gave $100,000 to the Working Families Coalition. OPSU, $350,000. CUPE, $215,000. Unifor, $300,000. UFCW, Food and Commercial Workers Union, $300,000. Electrical workers, $250,000. Sheet metal workers, $150,000. Painters, allied trades, $165,000. Even the cops were running ads. You remember the OPP was running ads? The union for the OPP? Mm-hmm. Were running ads? Do we really want that? Do we really want to go back to that? Does anybody want to go back to that? I don't want to go back to that. What do you? Go ahead.
It's fair to point out that the legislation did change, right? So what happened in 2003 and 2007 was then, that the legislation was changed and put in place with spending limits.
Kathleen Wynne changed it. The Wynne government.
Those numbers because there are returns that were required, and it's this is a delicate balance because is that what should be allowed? Do we want that kind of for me the issue is, do we want that money to be able to influence politicians? No. Do we want to have third parties who have issues with the government be able to have a voice in an election? Yes, but within a time frame, within a limited budget, in the world of keeping that third party money out of being of political influence direct to politicians, but allowing people to have a voice. And that's what the judge said yesterday. He 2 days ago, believed that the 6-month time frame was appropriate. And I thought it was a really good suggestion that this is something that an all-party committee is another lever that could have been used instead of going straight for the notwithstanding clause, is for an all-party committee to determine if there needed to be additional changes before the next election that would, whether it be, they didn't change the spending limit. There's a spending limit in place. They didn't make changes to that. They increased the time frame. A lot of rules around vendors, the types of, being able to share a message, for example. This feels like something that if the all-party committees looked at it, that maybe we would come to an interesting solution that would be that you'd be willing to accept because you would both, it would have a process that was not using the notwithstanding clause. And it was something that was definitely meant that you were not able to benefit personally. This is the Doug Ford government using the notwithstanding clause to change rules in an election so that they are not in the fear or threat that people will mobilize. And particularly, remember, if you're afraid 6 months out of an election of people having a voice, that's a concern.
Is it people having a voice, or is it? Sorry, Lindsay. Hold on, Lindsay. Is it about people having a voice, or is it about the rich, powerful, influential organizations having their voice?
Well, not with the spending limit now, right? So taking that level of money out of it, I think, was extremely important.
Okay. Andrew, what do you think, Andrew?
I think your point's bang on there, Rob.
Yeah, me too.
I think the people that care about this obviously are, some constitutional experts, some lawyers, but at the front of it, it's the unions who feel like they'll have less influence and less of a voice, and I don't think that the changes that the Ford government is going ahead with really will resonate with people. Certainly will not resonate with people to the effect that a 12 months worth of $1 million ad buys would. And to your earlier point, I fundamentally don't believe people want to see a return to that. I don't think people want to see the type of super PACs that we see in the U.S. Everyone's seen these ads in recent months against Erin O'Toole. Everyone's seen ads in recent months against Doug Ford. At a time that we're supposed to be having a discussion about, our political discourse and where sort of money's being directed, look at what kind of conversations and actions that these super PACs lead to down south. And if that's something that is concerning for people in Ontario, then I think we need to really think about what kind of influence we want to hand over to those groups.
Okay, let me ask you a final quick question. Do you think that this is a story that registers with the general public, or is it an inside Queen's Park story, inside the bubble story? What do you think, Lindsay?
I think the third-party advertising is inside bubble. I think the use of the notwithstanding clause and the doubts it raises in Ontarians about what else he'd use it for, if we're going to use it for something like this, is extremely concerning and very outside of the bubble. Okay. And will continue to be the hot topic on patios this weekend.
Well, maybe at Andrew's party, but
I assure you it will be the topic.
But is it just for wonks, though? That's what I want to get at. Is it just the wonks who are even paying attention to this?
Yeah, I think this is a wonk conversation on a scale of where this ranks with people. This is not when the Liberals and the NDP tried to form a coalition to take over a government from a party that won the most seats or the most votes. It's not that kind of thing that resonates with people. It is a process story, and as I said, I do think that in terms of damage to the government, a few days worth of a conversation on yet another overreach from the provincial government is less damaging than a year's worth of ads on air that you so graciously shared with us today.
Thank you. Thanks. Happy birthday again, Andrew. Enjoy your reopening weekend in style. Andrew Brander from Crestview, Liberal strategist Lindsay Maskell. That's Ontario politics this week. Who knows what next week will look like? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 17 degrees. In Smiths Falls, 18. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Patio dining. Some retail now just hours away from being allowed to reopen. Step 1 of the province's reopening begins at midnight tonight. This afternoon, we get the latest COVID-19 modeling numbers in the province. Here's City News reporter Laura Carney.
Step 1 of the province's reopening begins at 12:01 a.m. It'll also see some retail stores allowed to reopen, and it'll come just hours after the latest COVID-19 projections. New modeling data set to be released this afternoon. The Delta variant likely to be mentioned a lot. On Monday, the province's Associate Medical Officer of Health said we can expect this variant, first identified in India, to become the dominant strain. This is leading to calls from GTHA mayors to prioritize second-dose vaccines to hotspots. But the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health says the expected supply of vaccines is sufficient to get more people in hotspots vaccinated without having to allocate extra doses to those areas. I'm Laura Carney.
City News time at 10:02. Now, Ottawa's oldest pub will be among the ones first pouring pints when patios do open just after midnight. It comes with a feeling of cautious optimism. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
The Chateau Lafayette in the Byward Market will be opening its patio at 12:01 a.m. on Friday as the province enters into step 1 of its reopening plan. Zeke LaBelle is the general manager of the Laff and tells me the pub is moving forward but not sprinting forward.
Anything with the government and with COVID, you have to remain cautious. You just never know what kind of curveball is going to get thrown at you the next day, right? We just didn't see, we can't plan for this. We didn't see any of this coming.
Ottawa Coalition of BIA's chair Mark Kalusky adds other businesses are also cautiously optimistic about the reopening.
As excited as they are, they're still concerned that something's going to happen and we're going to end up back lockdown again.
He feels if folks work together and avoid indoor gatherings, this could very well be the last lockdown. Alex Gouge, City News.
The latest provincial COVID-19 numbers in a moment, but first your forecast with City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a fresher feeling wind for us today out of the east-northeast. Lots of sunshine. Our high 25 degrees tonight, mainly cloudy and 13. And tomorrow, slight chance of showers, otherwise mainly cloudy, 23. For today, the high 25.
And right now in Ottawa, 17 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 18. The new COVID case count is out today in Ontario. It's up a little bit over yesterday, 590 new cases. 25 of them are in Ottawa. There are 3 more cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 2 in Eastern Ontario, 1 new case in Renfrew. The province is also reporting 11 more deaths. Leaky and broken pipes leading to millions of cubic meters of drinking water wasted in our province. A construction alliance says many municipalities in Ontario have an estimated leakage rate of 10%. An assessment by consultants estimates that rate could be actually as high as 40%. One analysis for Smiths Falls estimated that rate between 2003 and 2019 ranged between 41% and 67%. To put that in perspective, the group says a leakage rate in Toronto, for example, estimated at 103 million litres every day. That amount would fill more than 15,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single year. City News time at 10:05. No more strikes in Vanier. The local bowling alley, MacArthur Lane, is shutting down. In a post on social media, the alley says with the sale of the property, they have ceased all activity. They say, though, it has been a privilege to help create memories that spanned decades and generations. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
I want to do a rapid poll here in this Talk Back hour. And keep score here. Got my scorecard here. Okay, right here. Scorecard. Doug Ford is going to use the notwithstanding clause to keep spending limits in place for third parties, special interest groups. okay, for elections. A judge said those limits that were imposed by the Ford government, unconstitutional. You can't do that, Mr. Premier. It's unconstitutional. It's a violation of charter rights. Toss them out, okay? So the Premier is going to use the notwithstanding clause in the Charter, Section 33, to keep them in place. Do you approve of this move? Approve or disapprove? Those are your choices right now. Approve or disapprove. The limits are $600,000 in the 12 months leading up to the election call, and then $100,000 during the writ period, okay? Ruled unconstitutional by the court. So Premier Ford is going to use his majority in the legislature to override the court ruling. Approve or disapprove? Approve or disapprove? We had Duff Conacher on from Democracy Watch, said it's the move of a dictator. It's dictatorial. Okay. So I want to know, we have, what do we have? 3 phone lines available, 750-1310, 750-1310, 750-1310. This is heavy-duty stuff, folks. This goes to the heart of the democratic process, okay? I also want to ask you, because I'm kind of a wonk for this kind of stuff, should we have a notwithstanding clause at all in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? And for the uninitiated, just ask yourself, can you really call yourself free? Because the Charter of Rights and Freedoms says we are free. We enjoy these fundamental freedoms. But can we really be free people if a government, and I mean any government, of any political stripe, if a government can come along and invoke a clause that says, well, those rights don't apply in this particular case. Thoughts, please, on these very important issues. We're talking about attack ads. This is like a long-standing feud. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, the Ontario PC Party and the Working Families Coalition. David's got some of their greatest hits. The Working Families Coalition, they hate conservatives.
Do you remember when the Conservative Party ignored the homeless, froze the minimum wage, canceled social programs and downloaded services to municipalities? 4 years later, social assistance has been increased and the minimum wage has been raised every year. There's even a new Ontario Child Benefit Program to help kids. But the Conservatives are hoping to turn back our progress, and that's what's at stake in this election.
Because conservatives are evil. They're evil. Yeah, so that a big question, right? Should well-funded special interest groups be able to spend unlimited amounts of money on advertising during election campaigns, or should there be a limit on that? That's another question, right? But should a Charter of Rights have a notwithstanding clause at all, or are rights full stop? I mean, all of these are important questions. They go to the very heart of the democratic system. Full and fair participation in a democracy. I know it's heavy-duty stuff on a Thursday morning, but we're all smart people. We can debate these heavy-duty issues. Boy, I'll tell you what, it really is a sight to behold watching the Democrats and Liberals. They'll set their hair on fire and scream from the rooftops their outrage over this move by the Ford government to invoke the notwithstanding clause over limits on spending by these so-called third parties. I hate that term, third parties. Let's call them what they are. They are well-funded, deep-pocketed special interest groups. We could call them super PACs. Here we don't call them super PACs. We call them third parties. This is not a new debate in this country. It's just the latest debate about this issue in this country. It has a long and glorious history, the whole issue of spending by special interest groups, deep-pocketed special interest groups, like unions, like big business, like the billionaire class. They're all well-funded, right? But should they be able to spend basically unlimited amounts of money on television ads, on radio ads, on newspaper ads, on social media advertising to try and influence the outcome of an election. Now, I have friends who are more of a libertarian bent than I am, and they say, sure. And you know what? They make a compelling argument. There's no doubt. It's a compelling argument. Look, do we have the right to free expression in this country or not? Is free expression protected by the Charter or not? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So surely, this is how their argument goes. Surely then, individuals, groups of like-minded individuals should be allowed to spend whatever they want to spend to their heart's content on advertising to try and get a preferred candidate or a preferred party elected during an election campaign. Like I said, very compelling argument. It is the argument that Stephen Harper made before he was prime minister, born out of his days as the leader of a special interest group, the National Citizens Coalition. Court case that began in Alberta that ended up all the way in the Supreme Court of Canada that ultimately ruled against Stephen Harper. And Harper was arguing at the time the Elections Act, the Federal Elections Act in this country, and the spending limits imposed by the Election Act on special interest groups is a violation of the Charter right to free expression. And the Supreme Court actually said, Mr. Harper, you know what? You're right, Mr. Harper. But it is a justified limit on free expression because it goes to fairness of the electoral process. And I don't want to get all too wonky here, but we have to have a handle on the history of the issue. The Supreme Court said in 2004, in Harper v. Canada, sure, everyone has the right to free expression, no doubt about that, but the bigger issue is about a free and fair election. And in the interest of a free and fair election, in Canada, we can't have the ability of the wealthy and well-financed special interest groups, like Big Labor, to spend to their heart's content and sway the outcome of an election because they would have an unfair advantage because they have millions of dollars in advertising budgets. And it was a split decision, 6-3, but Harper still lost. So at the federal level, that's why we have these very strict spending limits on the amount of money that a third party, a special interest group, can spend. That wasn't the case in Ontario for the longest time. It slowly changed. Kathleen Wynne brought in some restrictions. They were kept by Doug Ford and then expanded by Doug Ford, but maybe a bit too far, according to the court, which tossed it all out this week. Now, Doug is going to use the notwithstanding clause, Premier Doug Ford. Approve or disapprove of that? What do you think? Let's get her going here. Brian.
Hey, Rob.
Approve or disapprove, Brian?
Oh, I approve. And
you
thank you for bringing up Harper, by the way. And that goes directly to your second question.
On the notwithstanding clause, yeah.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruling was how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. And that notwithstanding clause was brought in to put limits on judicial activism, which is rampant in this country. It's beyond terrible.
Well, there was a concern among premiers at the time that without a notwithstanding clause, courts would have too much power.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's proven to be accurate. Who was it? The late Justice Anton Scalia said interpretation of the Constitution instead of what it says. He says it's what they wanted to say instead of what it really says. And they interpret it somewhere in between. And that's exactly what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So you approve of Doug Ford using the notwithstanding clause?
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you. There you go. Okay, so he's in favor of what Doug Ford is going to do. Let's take another call here. 750-1310, Bob, Ottawa South. Bob.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, Bob. What do you think? Approve or disapprove of what Doug Ford is? You do? Okay, all right.
Listened to your conversation with Duff Conacher.
Yes.
And I understand his point of view.
Okay.
And yet, despite what he says, the notwithstanding clause is a charter right. You've got to deal with it as a charter right.
Well, it's part of the charter, yeah. Section 33, yeah.
And as your previous caller said, some governments, provincial governments, were concerned that an activist court would have the power to introduce policy that would never make it through the Parliament of Canada.
Sure. And legislate from the bench. Legislate from the bench, Bob, basically, right?
Pardon me?
Legislate from the bench.
Yes.
Yes.
Unelected, unaccountable judges.
Yes.
And sometimes politicians or special interest groups prefer that route because they can't get the legislation.
Because they can't win an election, right? So yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And I think we often hear historically about the tyranny of the majority, with an activist court, with special interest groups, with moneyed groups. We have the tyranny of the minority.
Okay, interesting way to look at things, Bob. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Be right back. Approve or disapprove as Doug Ford opts for the nuclear option. He has the codes, ladies and gentlemen. He has the codes. And he's not afraid to use them. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting, and anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not, but more so now because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff, and then again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Got a rapid poll on a Thursday morning. Doug Ford going to use the notwithstanding clause to keep spending limits in place for special interest groups after a court said those limits were unconstitutional. What do you think about the Ford power move? Do you approve or disapprove? Nepean is a wonderful place to be in. And
good morning, Rob.
Good morning. What do you think about what Doug Ford is going to do? Does he have your approval?
I'm of two minds.
Right.
First of all, I'm listening to Mr. Conacher this morning and his description of blanketing and basically taking over the election, which is exactly what the Family Coalition was doing with Mr. Hudak, because I've never heard so many commercials all the time, 24/7.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what was happening. And he did not answer that occurrence. So what do you do then? because he did not. He on the one hand, he says you can't have that happening, but on the other hand, that's exactly what was happening. So what do we do about that?
He says you should study it. You should get a group of experts together, determine how much it would cost, what an appropriate time frame is, and that should be your limit.
Oh, really? And how often have we seen studies and committees and stuff, and then what comes out of that? What kind of actions do we see as a rule?
Well, sometimes stuff happens and sometimes stuff doesn't happen.
Exactly. So my trust in committees and studies and all that is not very high.
All right.
On the other hand, I don't think politically this isn't a very goof on Mr. Ford's part. Because now you've got all the other parties saying he's anti democracy and all this.
Sure, he's a dictator, right? He's an undemocratic thug,
But then again, the Supreme Court to me has been activism whole for the past 20 years. And I don't trust their judgment.
Okay, all right. Well, this wasn't a Supreme Court decision, so it was a lower court decision. I mean, that's one of the options that he had. That's why people are wondering, why is he going right for the nuclear option when he could just appeal it to a higher court?
Yeah, but by the time he appeals it, there's going to be an election, right?
Well, the election is June of next year.
Right, and how long does it take to go through the Supreme Court, get this all done?
Well, our political experts at 9:30 said the Attorney General could say, can you look at this and make it quick, kind of thing. So,
well,
right.
Can you be quick?
Okay, yeah. So you're on the fence, right? You're on the fence, is what you're saying. It says undecided here. Okay, I'll put you down as undecided. Okay, and you're usually much more decisive than that.
Well, when you have two sets of facts going,
yeah. Okay. All right.
Roll in and.
All right, Ann. Thank you. Bad phone connection. You're cracking up there. Going to let you go. Going to move along to Connor in Orleans. Connor, what do you think of the notwithstanding clause being used by Doug Ford to limit third-party advertising during elections?
Disapprove.
Disapprove. Okay.
There's my decisive answer. So I do believe in the notwithstanding clause. I agree with it existing. Okay. And let's face it, we would not have the Constitution that we have without it. Yep. However, it should never be used loosely, and it should be the absolute last resort. And in this case, it is not the last resort. And so therefore, Doug Ford should exercise the options available to him before using this, go through the court system. Do you remember? Well, I'm sure you remember in 2018 when Ford evoked the notwithstanding clause, and in the end, he was granted a stay.
That's right.
So he didn't have
on cutting the Toronto Council down to size, right?
Right.
Yeah,
now, the judge's ruling was laughable in that case, and so the notwithstanding clause came out. But he didn't have to use it. He was granted a stay. Even the higher court said the judge's ruling was dubious. I think given the amount of time that he has, he should exercise the legal options available to him and only use the notwithstanding clause for a very serious matter that is truly the last resort, and that's not what's happening now.
All right, Connor, thank you. Thank you, Connor. Yep, there you go. I think he expressed it very well, didn't he? Smith Falls. Sean, what do you think, Sean, about what the Premier's about to do here?
I think he should use it this time. All right. And only because, from what I understand, the court ruling struck down the law. We don't revert back to Wynn's law. There's the Wild West. There's no limit.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So that's why I agree. I don't think within a year that we could get that in. And so the Family Coalition has 2 election spending that they war chest now. And so if they spend $8 million in 2018, they have $16 million in their chest now because they could only spend $100,000 last time.
Okay. All right. So you think Ford is doing the right thing?
Well, just in this instance.
I
typically don't agree with
oh, really? Okay.
Using the notwithstanding clause for political reasons. It should be like both times he's used or threatened to use the notwithstanding clause, it's been for political reasons rather than, policy.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Yep. Up next, Bill, Ottawa. Bill, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Doug Ford would use the notwithstanding clause. What do you think?
I agree with him. It's there, and he's using it to solve a problem.
Yep.
But I disagree with the notwithstanding clause even being there.
Yes, okay.
And I think it may be time to think about scrapping the charter and going back to what we had before. It was much safer and better than the current situation.
Like the Diefenbaker Bill of Rights or something like that. Is that what you mean? Or,
the British North America Act was the Constitution then, and that was at least stable and sensible according to the common law, and we had the common law then. But the judiciary today are well, if you read the decision in Borowski versus the Queen, the Supreme Court clearly declared that they don't care what you plead, what your evidence is pled to them, they'll come down with whatever decision they want, and they clearly said that in that decision. They said the prosecution pleaded that the law is what you say it is, and they agreed with them.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that particular case.
That was a case in which Borowski was it was back to the abortion issue, and he was going to plead that he was going to prove that a human being was a human being even during the fetal stage.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. I don't want to get too far off track and go down that rabbit hole.
But it's pertinent to this in the sense that after he laid out all his case and how he's going to prove it, the prosecution said, we concede all that. And the prosecution said, you don't have to follow any facts that are you don't have to follow the law. The law is what you say it is. Oh, okay. And the court accepted that.
All right. Okay, Bill. Thank you. Okay. Halftime. Talk back hour with Doug Ford about to invoke the notwithstanding clause for the very first time in this province's history. Your reaction, please, here on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 18 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. COVID modeling numbers are coming out today from the province. First time in about 3 weeks they've done that. Now, We are finding out what the projection is for the immediate future. We do have today's actual number, 590 new cases today, 25 of them in Ottawa, 3 of them in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 2 in Eastern Ontario. There is 1 new case in Renfrew. Also, 11 more deaths being reported in Ontario. Nathaniel Veltman's virtual court appearance this morning in London, Ontario. He has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of 4 family members in London on Sunday and 1 count of attempted murder. Our Adrian Gobriel is covering the London court appearance so far. That appearance scheduled for 9 has not been made. Towns and city water systems are losing millions of cubic meters of drinking water through leaky pipes. A construction alliance says it's estimating leakage rate of 10% in cities and towns across Ontario. An estimate by consultants says that rate could be as high, though, as 40%. One analysis for Smiths Falls estimates a rate between 2003 and 2019 range between a water loss of 41% and 67%. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
We talked about the history with Stephen Harper, his battle for no spending limits on third-party advertising. That was in 2004, and Stephen Harper lost. But we should fast forward a decade because this is really where the Ontario PC Party, I think, is coming from now. You have to remember that 2014 election campaign here in Ontario when Hudak was the leader of the Ontario PC Party. And it looked like the PCs had that one in the bag, okay? It was just a matter of let's get through the campaign, come election day. It's inevitable. It's going to be Premier Tim Hudak. We had a Liberal Party that's just mired in scandal, lies and cover-ups piling up. But then, for reasons that I really don't think we've reconciled yet or quite come to terms with, the Tim Hudak campaign team decided to self-destruct and promised to fire 100,000 public servants in Ontario. Now, maybe that's not a bad idea. Given the number of public servants that we have in the government of Ontario, it's more than 1 million people work for the government of Ontario. Okay. But you don't say you're going to do it during an election campaign, you dummies. Dumbest campaign move ever made in the history of Ontario politics, because when you think about it, what was he promising to do in firing 100,000 government workers? You're not firing 100,000 government workers. Okay. First of all, that's 100,000 people that are never voting for you. Okay. It's their spouse. It's their families and extended families and their neighbors, and maybe they have children who are grandchildren who are voting age or whatever. All of a sudden, 100,000 government workers becomes 1 million votes. Dumb as paint. So the PCs lost that election campaign. Hudak lost its job, never lived it down. The Ontario PC Party snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Kathleen Wynne captures, the most unlikely of majority governments ever. And they get a lot of help from their friends in organized labor, like this group that's in the news today, Working Families Coalition.
Tim Hudak talks the talk about getting Ontario working, but in our community, he's cutting an estimated 11,100 workers, boosting local unemployment by 1.9%. 1 in 6 public sector jobs lost, many in healthcare and education. Is that really the way to get Ottawa working? Our family, our friends, our community are all at risk. Can we really trust Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs? Authorized by Working Families.
Yep, and they played a version of that ad in every city in Ontario. The website is still up there. You can listen to every ad. They have one for Ottawa, Toronto, Cambridge, Guelph, London. Take your pick, right? Working Families Coalition, which is the umbrella group for all the big unions in Ontario, teachers unions, trade unions, nurses unions, you name it. They The union spent their own money on the election ads, and then they funneled millions and millions of dollars into this other group. They colluded. The Working Families Coalition. Close to $9 million in 30 days they spent. Okay, $9 million in 30 days. And the PCs have never forgotten that. And Doug Ford has said, I'll go so far as to use the notwithstanding clause to make sure they can't do that to me in 2022. And for this, he's being called a dictator. Maybe you think deservedly so. Okay, that's why we're doing a rapid poll, because I want to get your take on it. At 750-1310, 750-1310, back to the phones. Vince in Nepean.
Hello, Rob.
Yes, sir. What do you think about what Doug Ford is doing?
Well, there's about 3 or 4 things about what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And
do you approve or disapprove, first of all, Vince? Let me get you there.
I totally disapprove.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Right. Yeah.
I'll tell you why. I have 3 or 4 reasons for that.
3 or 4, okay.
Number one, it's going to set a precedent that in the future, any provincial premier that comes after him, oh, well, we already started that process. Why not have it with notwithstanding clause for something else we want? So it goes on and on and on. It just opens the door to something which is going to be regrettable. He shouldn't be doing that for something so I don't think is that big a deal. Because, you know, Rob, when somebody advertises something, they say, buy this car or buy this loaf of bread. You don't have to buy the car or the loaf of bread. You just hear somebody advertising it.
Okay.
Okay, that's one aspect of it.
All right.
Okay. The other aspect is, you know, why can't they have ads that counteract those ads? If they're, you know, if they surely oppose them and they say that's not true or whatever the case may be, explain themselves. I mean, there's all kinds of avenues for ads like that.
Yeah, well, we have some. We actually have some anti-liberal ads here from the group. People remember the group Ontario Proud. Play that. Go ahead, play that for me, okay?
Can we really trust Kathleen Wynne? She says she supports working Ontarians. But Ontario workers haven't had a raise in 15 years. Wages haven't gone up. Disposable income has gone down. With a record like this, how can we believe anything she says? We can't trust Kathleen Wynne. We just can't.
That's Ontario Proud.
And that's a perfect example that you can counteract anything your opposition says by ads. The other thing is, ads create jobs.
Ads create jobs. Okay, I suppose.
Well, for radio, TV.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look, I mean, if the big unions want to spend $9 million in 30 days in the next election, we would welcome the business here at City News. Let me tell you, I was just speaking on my own behalf here. Spend it all on the Rob Snow Show, okay?
But the biggest problem is, it sets a bad precedent. It sets a very bad precedent for fickle premiers to do things under Wynne.
You don't think it's serious enough an issue?
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not. All right, Vince. I got you, Vince. Okay, thank you. All right, let's take another one here. 4, 2, and 1 right now. 4 are for Doug Ford, 2 are against, and 1 is undecided. Mel, Lincoln Heights. Mel.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, Mel, what do you think about what Doug Ford is doing if he does this and invokes the notwithstanding clause to crack down on union election spending?
I agree.
You agree? Okay, all right. Why is that, sir?
Okay, because let's face it, the Constitution can be changed at any time by the province of Quebec. All these lefties agree. So...
Well, certainly Premier Legault is not shy about using the notwithstanding clause.
As far as I'm concerned, he's got away with a racist ruling over in Quebec.
Yes.
And our Prime Minister says that is legal.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If he can change the Constitution, and he's not even a signed member, Quebec's not a signed member of the Constitution.
Never recognized the Canadian Constitution. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all these lefties that are saying they disagree because of the Constitution, the Constitution has to be revised.
Okay. Well, this is kind of the secondary question, isn't it? Should we really have a notwithstanding clause in the Constitution at all?
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it myself. So
yes.
Yeah. All right, Mel. Thank you.
Bye.
Yep. Bye. Robert in Nepean. What do you think, Robert?
Well, I agree with Doug Ford.
Okay.
It's his only avenue.
Okay.
And the money that...
But it's not his only avenue, sir. He could appeal,
He could take it
right?
back to court. He could appeal it for sure.
Yeah.
But here I'm retired. I was part of the OSSDF. And every time they put these ads out, they weren't representing me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't agree with the ads.
The High School Teachers Union.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So why does the union have that right to spend my money on an ad that I don't agree with?
Sure.
Okay. So they're telling everybody that we agree with what they're doing. So I suggest to you that their ads aren't totally representing the union membership.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Yep. I mean, I come back to that. I'll never forget that 2014 campaign. I'll never forget how mad Lowell was. I can't wait to get Lowell on the air tomorrow. He went into his office when he heard that Tim Hudak had just promised to fire 100,000 government workers. He slammed the door on his office so hard, I thought the roof was going to cave in, or the door was going to come off the hinges. He was so mad at Tim Hudak. He said he's just lost the election. He's just lost the election. And then it was full throttle from the unions against Hudak back then. I mean, every second ad on the radio was an attack from a union. I mean, believe me, $9 million. You can get a lot of advertising for $9 million. And I think Doug Ford's thing is they're not going to do that to me. Cindy, Ottawa, what do you think, Cindy?
Well, I do think he did the right thing, just because commercials don't have to be truthful.
Right.
So, and they don't have to prove what they're stating.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear all non-verified things being told as facts during an election, that's bad. And I kind of agree with your previous caller. I'm a nurse, and they were saying things about how nurses approve of the Liberals, and that wasn't my take. It's like the unions are using our dues to get power, not really to give us service anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for your call. Greatly appreciated. Let's take another one here. It is Irene in Ottawa. Irene.
Hi.
Hi, Irene. What do you think, Irene?
In my opinion, I don't believe the unions are democratic. They say they are.
Yeah.
They don't listen to the members. I'll tell you an experience I had about 12 years ago. I just happened to find, I was in the federal PSAC, member there, and I happened to find the board of directors statements right on the internet. I couldn't believe it. And all they were talking about at that time was how are they going to get rid of Harper? How are they going to attack him? So I believe unions have their own agenda. They don't work for the members. They work for their own few political. And I think Doug Ford has to do this because it will be all negative from the working family.
Well, why not just appeal it or go back to, certainly you could go back to the old rules. Why not do something like that?
Because it's the time is the factor.
Time,
I mean,
okay. All right.
Well, you look at him like 2 or 3 weeks ago when he seemed to be in hiding, and it seemed to be the attack had stopped from the teachers' union. I guess when he decided he was closing down the school longer. You notice there's no attack ads when the schools are closed from the union, from the teachers' union.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So you're okay with it then? You're okay with it.
What other choice do we have?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, Irene, I got you. Okay. So we're going to have some interesting calls coming up. Do we have a Doug Ford attack ad from the Working Families? Yeah, play that one, David, to take us into break here, okay? Oh, this is from Etvo. Well, they're all the same. Go ahead. Technical difficulties. We'll reload and we'll get back to you when we come back. Rob Snow Show, City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly. but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and had the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have from combos and to small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to our platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Let's play that ETFO ad. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario going after Doug Ford.
Ontario has one of the best public education systems in the world. But the cuts the Ford government is proposing, like larger classes in grades 4 to 8 and underfunding services for students with special needs, will have long-term negative consequences for students. The government may also be considering damaging changes to full-day kindergarten. It's up to all of us to protect high-quality public education. Take action at buildingbetterschools.ca.
Okay.
A message from the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario.
I wanted to play that because all of these unions, they collude, okay, and they spend their own money, but then they give money to the Working Families Coalition, and the Working Families Coalition, it spends money on advertising too. So whatever the case, there were spending limits in effect, 12 months, $600,000, and then during the writ period, $100,000. And the court in Ontario said unconstitutional. Can't do it. It's arbitrary. It's an overreach. And the Ford government is responding by saying, well, we will override what the court is saying using the notwithstanding clause in Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Do you approve or disapprove? Now, calling in on line one here, this is an interesting call that we'll take. Don Boudria has called in, former member of Parliament from the Chrétien years for Glengarry Prescott Russell. Good morning, Mr. Boudria.
Good morning.
So let me guess. I'll put you down as approving of Doug Ford's using the notwithstanding clause.
No.
No, I didn't think so.
Absolutely not.
Why?
But interestingly, or perhaps not, I was a minister who actually had election expense rules on third parties implemented, and it was brought to the Supreme Court. And I won on behalf of the government.
Right.
So
in the Harper ruling, is that right, Mr. Boudreau? Or?
Well, that's correct, obviously. The Harper ruling was against my bill.
Okay.
Now, a couple of things that should be raised here. First of all, the Supreme Court, in what is known as the Libman decision on the cessation of Quebec in 1990, gave actually the outline of how you could do one of these laws, and that's the model I use, and I used it successfully, even before the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So for him to pretend that he cannot have election expense rules on third parties is simply incorrect. Just because he might have not drafted it properly, might have gone outside of the limits set by the Libman decision, and then, of course, failed to appeal on top of that. So obviously, for all those reasons, the justification for utilizing the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution is simply not there.
Okay. What are you doing these days?
Well, there are two options open to the provincial government. The first one you've outlined yourself quite correctly.
Yeah.
They can appeal.
Yeah.
Second, they could go back to the drawing board and redraft the law in a way that is in conformity with the previous decisions of the Supreme Court.
Right. That is constitutional. That is constitutional, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sure.
And, they have the opportunity to do that. Where I think the problem lies is that once you go outside of an election campaign, the justification for election spending rules becomes weaker and weaker.
Yeah, I think you're on thin ice outside of the writ period, right, Mr. Boudreau?
Well, that's essentially what it is. Now, mind you, if they had gone outside of the writ period by saying for the last 30 days or something, there will be limitations, or that within the last 30 days or 60 days or whatever, that brief period of time, that any expense that you incur as a third party will be chargeable to what you're allowed to spend during an election campaign. Then I think it would have gone through the Supreme Court quite nicely. You could appeal that and win.
Okay.
But he's not even trying that avenue.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Boudreau, for your experience, sir. Nice to hear from you, a longtime member from Glengarry, Prescott, Russell there. Don Boudreau. There is an issue of fairness, though, right? I mean, let's say you're a local candidate. Usually on Thursdays, Randall Denley would join us. Okay, Randall ran for the Ontario PCs. Yeah, Randall couldn't be on the show today, but you have the Working Families Coalition is spending about $90,000 a day, okay, all across Ontario to try and defeat Ontario PC candidates. I bet you Randall was running against Bob Chiarelli and Alex Cullen, okay? A very, very, battle of the titans, okay? You got all-star columnist from the newspaper, the NDP kingmaker in the West End, and the incumbent cabinet minister, former mayor, former regional chair. Battle of the titans, Ottawa, West Nepean. I bet you Randall his whole campaign, he's probably allowed to spend $90,000. The Ottawa, the Families Coalition spending $90,000 a day. How are you supposed to compete with that? Randall could go knock on every door in Ottawa, West Nepean, and he probably did. And then he gets home on the 6 o'clock news. Every ad is a Working Families Coalition ad. Every ad in the newspaper. Every ad on the radio says don't vote for Randall Denley. He's a bad guy. He's going to fire your mother, or your father, or your brother, or your sister. And he lost to Bob Chiarelli in Ottawa West. But was it a fair fight? I wouldn't say it was a fair fight. In Canada, Colin. Good morning, Colin. You're on City News.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about fairness, and it's about transparency. You have got multi-billion-dollar organizations in these public sector unions spending millions of dollars in their own interest, in the interest, maybe not even of all their members, because all their members do not support a certain party or another one. They're free to vote for whoever they like. Going up against individual candidates in ridings, the spending limit, Rob, is about $100,000.
Yeah.
Now, when you take out, the signs, the office expense, just everything else, an average campaign might be able to spend $15,000 or $20,000 on any type of advertising out, like in radio or TV or newsprint. The rest of the money gets eaten up in all the other activities of the campaign.
Got to rent an office, got to get some phones. You got to rent an office, you got to get phones hooked up, you got to do all this stuff, right? So
so then you're up against a union that union groups, or not just union groups, any big money. We often hear the left and the Liberals and the NDP talking about we got to get big money out of politics. This is not fair. People need to decide. Well, these organizations are representing their own interests. Ontario sits right now about $398 billion in debt, and we're adding about 30-some billion dollars this year alone because of pandemic spending. Most of that is going into salaries for these public sector union workers. So, of course, they have an interest to keep a government in there that's not going to say, well, just a minute, maybe we got to think about how we're spending our money. Maybe a little austerity is in line. So the minute anybody talks about some austerity, all of a sudden you've got these unions that can put, they spent $9 million. That's more than the party's allowed to spend in an entire writ period.
Yeah.
It's just not fair.
Okay. Thanks, Colin. I got to run. I want to take one more. I got to take one more before the news. Thanks. Okay. I want to take Alec's call because he's been waiting there in Canada. Alec, what do you think, Alec, about Doug Ford and the notwithstanding clause?
Hey, Rob. So I usually call you. I call your show quite a bit.
Yeah.
And usually I would not really care about this because whatever union or organization want to spend money on whatever political ads, it's their thing. I don't have to buy what they're saying. But at this point in time in this country, I will support any politician or any public figure from anywhere in a political spectrum that will stop the momentum of sliding us further into this socialist abyss that we're on. Our history is being destroyed. Our values, our universities are becoming breeding grounds for communists, and I don't like it. I don't like it a bit.
All right.
Any politician or public figure that will stop this momentum, I will support.
All right, Alec. Thank you. I don't know about the breeding ground for communism crack, but whatever floats your boat at this point. Hey, look, from that into another hot topic, and that is the impending, it sounds like, passage of the Internet Regulation Bill, Bill C-10, coming up next on City News.
Is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 18 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The man accused of deliberately running over and killing 4 members of a Muslim family in London, Ontario, has had his case adjourned to next week. Nathaniel Veltman made a brief virtual court appearance today, facing 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Veltman says he is still in the process of retaining a lawyer. Police allege the attack was planned and premeditated that targeted Muslims. Veltman is set to return to court on June 14th. City News Time 11:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
And so fresher feeling wind for us today out of the east-northeast. Lots of sunshine, our high 25 degrees. Tonight, mainly cloudy and 13. And tomorrow, slight chance of showers, otherwise mainly cloudy, 23. For today, the high, 25.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 18 degrees. The new COVID case count today is up over yesterday, but 590 new cases. 25 of them are in Ottawa, 3 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There are 2 more in Eastern Ontario and 1 new case in Renfrew. Just over 31,400 test results were completed for these numbers, the positivity rate at 2%. There are also 11 more deaths reported in Ontario over the last 24 hours from COVID-19. City News Time 11:02. Ottawa's oldest bar is set to open its patio right as restrictions ease just after midnight. But businesses in general are feeling cautiously optimistic about this reopening. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
The Chateau Lafayette in the Byward Market will be pouring pints right at 12:01, which General Manager Deke LaBelle says is long overdue. However, she tells me she is cautious over any COVID-related government decisions.
We're cautiously optimistic. We're moving forward, but we're not sprinting forward.
Ottawa Coalition of BIA's chair Mark Kalusky adds others in the business community share that sentiment, but he's hopeful there won't be another lockdown.
I think if we all keep working together, I think if we all sort of avoid the indoor gatherings, let's do it. We can get past this and not have another set of lockdowns.
He adds if a business doesn't have a patio, order takeout to support until they are allowed to fully open. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News Time 11:03. Queen's Park being recalled. The Ford government will introduce legislation today to invoke the controversial notwithstanding clause.
The Ford government is using this notwithstanding clause to make it so third-party advertisers can only spend $600,000 on ads in the year lead up to the next election. Government House Leader Paul Calandra.
There cannot be a system in the province of Ontario where third-party and advertising is not regulated.
Minister, people are going to look at this and they're going to say, there's a government scared about the next election.
This process of regulating third-party spending started with Prime Minister Crestview back in 1997.
Duff Conacher with Democracy Watch tells me he thinks this move is illegal.
It's undemocratic and dictatorial and likely illegal for Doug Ford to invoke the notwithstanding clause to impose his arbitrary, excessive and unconstitutional spending restrictions on advertising.
The legislature will be meeting overnight this weekend and again on Monday. I'm Richard Southern.
City News Time 11:04. Leaky pipes are at fault for drinking water going to waste throughout Ontario. An assessment by the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance says millions of cubic meters meant for drinking are being dumped into the ground every year because of leaky pipes. Most municipalities seem to lose anywhere from 10% up. The number could be as high as 40%. An analysis for Smiths Falls, for example, says the number is even higher, 41 to 67% leakage rate between 2003 and 2019. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
I've been expressing my worry, my fear, my concern about Bill C-10 through the whole darn process, and my worry has not abated. Rachael Harder is the Conservative Member of Parliament representing Lethbridge, and is the official opposition's digital government critic. And she joins me this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you. What has been happening at the committee looking into Bill C-10?
Sure. So basically, what's happened at committee is on Friday, actually, the government tried to move a motion in the House that would allocate time within the Heritage Committee where the bill is being considered. And so that would limit debate to 5 hours before the bill has to be voted on as a whole.
Right.
Of course, as Conservatives, we felt that this was an imposition on our voice being heard, and you know, it thwarts democracy, and so we fought it as best as we could. We held it off until Monday when it returned to the House, at which point then the Liberals were able to ram it through. Now at committee, the committee has been, they met last night, which was, quote, an emergency meeting that was called, and there was a backroom deal that was cooked up between the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc in order to cancel other important committees and make sure that that the Heritage Committee was able to meet with regard to Bill C-10.
Okay,
and then they proceeded to do the same today.
Okay, let me just jump in there.
Sure.
When you say backroom deal, well, what did they cook up that you didn't know about? Give me some sense of that.
Yeah, for sure. So committee wasn't supposed to meet until Friday, but what ended up happening is we were given last minute notice, maybe 2 hours at the most, that the committee was all of a sudden going to meet in, quote, an emergency capacity. And it was done with the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP. They were talking in a back room, and they came to this decision, and so they were able to move forward with the decision without needing the consent of the Conservatives.
Right. Okay. So they cooked up this deal with their opposition, with the other opposition parties then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, the other political parties have teamed up in order to implement what I would call a gag order. So anyone who would be opposed to Bill C-10 or have important questions to ask, at the end of 5 hours, you know, that's it. And to put that in context, we're talking about hundreds of pages that need to be, you know, considered. So 5 hours is nothing.
Okay. So now what happens?
So right now,
it goes to the House of Commons for a vote and then off to the Senate, or?
So as we're speaking right now, it's being discussed in committee. It's due for at least another hour of discussion. At that point, 5 hours have been completed.
Right.
And so the chair of the committee can then stop the process if he chooses to do so.
This is the Heritage Committee? I'm sorry, is this the Heritage Committee?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So another, whopping 1 hour of committee work on this.
Yeah, that's exactly it, yes.
Yeah. And then to the House for a vote?
Yes, that's correct. So then it'll go to the House, and it will end up passing to the House with a number of amendments attached to it. And the Speaker of the House will determine whether the bill has to be voted on as a whole with amendments included, or if each amendment gets to be considered individually.
Okay, so give us an update. I mean, for me, there are so many concerning things about this, but the big one is the whole issue of, I believe it's 4.1, user-generated content.
You got it.
Okay. Is that still part of the legislation, the proposed legislation, Rachael Harder? Is that still in there?
Right. So when the bill was originally introduced to the committee, it included this clause 4.1 that protected your content, my content, your uncle's content when posted online. So it wouldn't be subject to government regulation. However, that clause, that protective mechanism, was removed from the legislation, and that's really what the big problem is with this bill, is that ultimately, at the end of the day, without that protection, Canadians are going to be subjected to government regulation with regard to the things that they post on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc.
Yeah. Now, I don't have to tell you, but the minister has said repeatedly that's not the case. Mm-hmm. It will be up to the social media platform. It'll be basically they're outsourcing this kind of patrolling of the internet to the platforms themselves, and they're not interested in going after, Canadians like Rob Snow and Rachael Harder. They don't care about us. The platforms might, but the government doesn't. What do you think about that?
Sure. It's a really deceitful and sly way to talk about the legislation, because essentially what he's saying is that it's going to be left up to the social media platforms to take care of. Sure. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the government dictating to the CRTC, which is the regulatory arm of the government. And then the CRTC is going to dictate to YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, etc. So yes, actually the government is going to be implementing regulation that is going to apply to social media. They're just going to use the CRTC to be the bad guy.
Okay. Another concern that I have is about net neutrality.
Right.
And this is net neutrality is kind of this doctrine, if you will, that says I should have equal access to all sorts of internet content, to all internet content, regardless of who my provider is. Okay, that is especially important in Canada, where we have a telecommunications industry that is so vertically integrated, where you have, and I work for one, okay, and I used to work for another big one. I've worked for the two biggest ones, so maybe this isn't going to be popular with my boss. I don't know, but nevertheless, we have in Canada a telecommunications industry where the internet service providers own the internet infrastructure, but they also own the content providers as well. A lot of content providers that are streamed through. And net neutrality says, regardless of my internet provider, it should not play favorites. For example, if I subscribe to Rogers and I'm a Rogers customer, Rogers then shouldn't make it difficult to get Bell content, and vice versa. That's called net neutrality, right? And Canadian governments have said, yes, we believe in net neutrality, and we think net neutrality is a good idea, and we should strive for it to have net neutrality for Canadians in their internet experience. I'm wondering if that is even guaranteed, though, because to me, if we're going to have new internet regulations, surely to goodness that has to be part of it.
Sure. I would probably, in very simple terms, I would sum up net neutrality as equal access for all.
Equal access for all, yeah.
So no matter what site you go to, no matter who your internet provider is, you should be able to access information freely and at the same speed. So one site cannot be shown favoritism by being faster than another, or some content on one site can't be, hidden from you by one provider but then made available by another provider. So it's those sorts of things. So it is equality for all. Now, that principle is an extremely important principle in a place like Canada, because it allows for our freedom to explore the internet, to access information, to, create and post the content that we want, etc. This will be brought under attack by Bill C-10, because Bill C-10 will implement a regulation that forces streaming companies and internet streaming companies, I should say, and social media platforms to show favoritism or bump up things that would be deemed Canadian content. Which means if you're going to bump up things that are Canadian content, inevitably some things have to get bumped down. In other words, they become more hidden. This is picking and choosing winners and losers.
Yeah.
And so it is, in fact, actually giving greater access to some content and lesser access to other content, which is in direct violation of net neutrality.
So, look, the clock is ticking on this parliamentary session, right?
Right.
Do you think they'll get this done before the recess? Is that the goal? Is that the ultimate goal here?
Well, I think they're doing their best to ram this through in a really dictatorial nature. I mean, like I said, they called a committee spur of the moment yesterday. They've called another 2 committee meetings spur of the moment today. They are doing everything that they possibly can to ram this through. Once it gets through committee, it has to come to the House. The House has to vote on it, and then it goes over to the Senate.
Sure.
Now, if the Senate is willing to sit over the summer, then potentially they could pass this legislation, but I don't see that the Senate is willing to do that.
Okay. At the committee level, I mean, look, you're supposed to have these hearings. They're supposed to be exhaustive. So you're supposed to get into the nitty-gritty, the minutia, right? That's the job of a parliamentary committee.
Yeah, that's
of a piece of legislation. So here we have this monumental piece of legislation that's going to regulate the internet like never before in this country. As I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong. Nobody from Google ever appeared at the Heritage Committee. Is that true?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah. TikTok. Nobody from TikTok appeared. Nobody from Facebook appeared. Somebody from Netflix was there. But you have, and with no Google there, that means, first of all, no YouTube either. So nobody from YouTube was there either. How can you possibly say you've even investigated this at the Heritage Committee where you're going to regulate big tech, you're going to regulate the internet experience, and nobody from the biggest of big tech, save Netflix, has even appeared before the committee? It's kind of ridiculous to me, Rachel.
And I think you're asking an important question, and I'll comment on it, but I also would like to highlight that we also have not heard from artists or creators, which is a big deal because this government is saying that this bill is going to protect Canadian artists, that it's going to help them. But yet the committee hasn't taken time to even hear from them and understand their perspective on this piece of legislation. That's a huge concern. But to come back to your point with regards to large streaming companies, you're absolutely correct. We have not heard from them in any productive manner. So, on the side, I've taken time to meet with those individuals and I've taken time to meet with artists and creators and I've heard their voice. But if the committee doesn't take that time, if the committee doesn't investigate that well, then I believe that they are not actually going through the proper process to put this legislation in place in a way that is actually going to serve Canada well. And I think that's exactly the point. I don't actually think the Liberals really want to hear from Canadians or from these experts or these industries. I actually think they just want to ram this legislation through. Clearly.
And that's the intent. Yeah. Thank you, Rachael Harder. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Good to chat.
Conservative Member of Parliament, Lethbridge. Pat Uguccioni will talk about some local City Hall issues, go over what happened at the City Council meeting yesterday. He's the managing editor of the Ottawa Community Voice newspapers. That's coming up on City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names. The colors are fun. The logo is fun. And it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives. It's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is, of course, everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well. occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. Two other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
City Council meeting yesterday. Let's review it. City Hall Insider, Pat Uguccioni, is back with me, managing editor, Ottawa Community Voice Newspapers. Good morning. You're well?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you again, Pat, and glad to hear that you're well. So when you look through the agenda and go over kind of the results of the City Council meeting yesterday, what stands out for you?
Well, I guess you have to talk about the
leak?
admission.
The addition, yeah.
I mean, it came as a surprise. It was almost an afterthought at the very end of the meeting, and sort of kept everyone on the edge of their seats unexpectedly, we'll say.
Oh yeah, it totally snuck it in there right at the end, right?
They did. I almost missed it. I had to turned the sound off, and then I saw it on the screen, and I had to turn the sound back on and say, "Hey, what's this?" So I mean, whatever you think of the individual councillor, I think people will have difficulty sort of understanding how this can happen. Does it does it pass the smell test? A lot of people probably say no.
So again, just to remind people, John Willing, the longtime City Hall correspondent for Post Media, reported on a story based on sources about the costs of lawsuits, the dollar figures related to lawsuits related to the sinkhole light rail construction in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And among the details in the documents that John managed to find, not only the dollar figures, but the city's legal strategy, which seemed to really upset the mayor and his allies around the council table. But nevertheless, there it was in the newspaper, in the media, and there was there are calls for an investigation, for the integrity commissioner to investigate. And Eli El-Shantiri went so far as to say, well, maybe we should call the cops, which I thought was like, wow, extraordinary. So then Tim Tierney, which to me basically is like, we got to find the leaker. We got to find the leaker. We got to plug the leak. We got to plug the leak. Very Nixonian. So it turns out the leaker is Tim Tierney, the Beacon Hill Civil Ward councillor. And just literally as the clock is winding down on Rogers Television, they're about to roll the credits, okay, for the city council meeting. Here's Councillor Tierney saying, all right, it was me.
I need to take the opportunity to publicly advise my council colleagues, city staff, and residents of Ward 11, Beacon Hill, Cedarville, that I was the person who sent the confidential memo dated May 10th, 2021, entitled Claim Related to Builders Risk Policy Following the Sinkhole Event, to a member of the media, and for the inappropriate action, I am truly sorry and sincerely apologize.
I'm truly sorry. I sincerely apologize. Okay. All right. You know what, Pat? One of the weird things is, I'd like your take on this, is when it came up for a vote, should we investigate and try to find out who the leaker is? Tierney voted for that. He voted for that.
Well, in his statement, he said
absolutely.
At the time he didn't realize he had done it. I mean, I know when you watch it, and I actually rewatched it this morning. I talk about this a lot in your show, that a lot of this stuff seems like rehearsed and scripted, And if you saw his statement, it was written. He read it out, and then the councillor, sort of rescinding his motion, read out a statement, and the mayor read out a statement. So this was all sort of, I mean,
it was orchestrated, right? Like there was it was obviously it was orchestrated. This is how we're going to deal with this kind of thing.
Right. And one of the interesting things that I caught the second time I listened to it, that this was emailed. It wasn't handed over in a brown envelope. So, I mean, it's a pretty clumsy leak if you're emailing something, because there's so many ways to sort of.
You're going to get caught. Yeah.
So, I mean, it lends credence to it was done by accident, but. I mean, I don't know what the motive would have been for this councillor to have leaked this in the first place. I mean, a lot of people say he's on the Watson Club, or he's one of his trusted
well,
chairs. So
let's think if it wasn't Tim. Let's say it wasn't Tim Tierney, but rather it was Jeff Leeper or Menard or somebody like that.
We all would agree that
Shirelli or something.
There would have been more of a magnifying glass on this that had been somebody that's not doesn't appear, or is not on FedGo, is not a committee chair, is not in and in one of the trusted soldiers, we'll say. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Boy, it's something else. You can't fight City Hall. That old line. You get 3,100 objections. Okay. During, say, public consultation process about this controversial development warehouse application for the South Nepean Business Park. Mm-hmm. 3,100 for a local issue. That's a lot. Okay, that's a bit. That means the number of people who are really opposed to it is a lot higher than that, and Councillor Mina is opposed to it. Nevertheless, passes. Right? Whatever. Thanks. Thanks for having sharing your opinion. But whatever. What did you think about that?
Well, I've actually watched this issue for quite some time as it worked its way through the process, and there was some evidence yesterday that if you look at the list on that petition, only about 300 or 400 were actually from Riverside South. But still, that's a lot of people. People don't usually take the time, out of their busy lives to put their name to a letter or a petition.
Well, that's my point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this business park has a long history. The old city of Nepean put it in there as an employment node, hoping to bring commerce to that part of the city, which was very underserviced 3 decades ago. Never quite worked out. They rezoned it to allow JDS Uniphase, and I'm sure with your high tech knowledge, that was a booming business at one time, and then it in the tech boom went away. So sort of been sitting there underused. So I guess the selling point and the BIA in that area is spoke in support of this. We're looking to attract business to the city. Here's one in an underused business park. So that's the rationale for approving this. But in the past 30 years, there's been a population explosion, lots of residential around there. It is a business park. It is zoned to do what this business wants to do. So, they sort of weighed the positives and negatives and came in with this. So not sure if the opposition is 3,000 or 4,000, as the petition might show, but 300 or 400 is still a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, that's a booming business right now in Ottawa.
Yeah, the argument again is it's better to have it in one location in a business park that's designed for this type of business, rather than breaking it up into little pieces all over the city to try to mitigate community concerns, and that was the argument. I mean, easy to say that when it's not being located in your backyard.
Sure.
But that was sort of the argument there yesterday.
Yeah. All right, Pat. Great to hear from you this week.
Great. Thanks.
Talk soon, okay?
Yep.
Bye-bye. Managing Editor, Ottawa Community Voice, Pat Uguccioni. We've got a great guest coming up right after the 11:30 news. To me, one of the must-read stories of the week in world news is this bombshell report from ProPublica on the billionaires and how little tax they pay. There are some years, Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest person in the world, paid no income tax. None. Wealthiest person in the world paid no income tax. Incredible. The secret IRS files. Paul Kiel will join us from ProPublica. Coming up on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, the 10th of June. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, we've got sunny skies, a little breezy, and 19 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Provincial health officials report 25 new COVID-19 cases in Ottawa out of 590 new cases across Ontario. The province is reporting 11 more deaths due to the virus. Elsewhere locally, Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit confirms 2 new cases of COVID-19, and Public Health Ontario is reporting 2 new infections in Eastern Ontario and 1 new case in Renfrew County. Ontario's fiscal watchdog says the province's economy will rebound over the next 2 years, but the government is unlikely to reach its goal of a balanced budget by the start of the next decade. The Financial Accountability Office released a report on the province's spring economic and budget outlook today, assessing the financial picture as the province starts to emerge from the pandemic. If COVID-19 vaccine distribution goes ahead as planned and the pandemic subsides, the report predicts real gross domestic product will rise by 5.8% this year and 4% next. But the FAO said economic growth could be slower if public health measures and vaccinations fail to contain a resurgence of the virus. The report also found that under current policies, the government won't balance its books by 2029-2030 as proposed in this year's budget. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has left Canada on a foreign trip for the first time in more than a year. He's attending the G7 summit in Cornwall, England. For the first time, all G7 leaders will be in the same room since 2019 without former U.S. President Donald Trump. Current President Joe Biden will also be in attendance, his first trip abroad since being elected to the White House last fall. I'm Sarah Buchan. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
ProPublica published this week extraordinary details about the extremely wealthy and the taxes they pay, or better put, the taxes they don't pay. ProPublica obtained a vast trove of IRS data on the tax returns of thousands of the wealthiest people in the United States, going back more than 15 years. And these are names you know, names like Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. And it shows that at times they paid little in federal income taxes despite soaring fortunes. It's one of the must-reads of the week. The secret IRS files. And Paul Kiel is here to walk us through it, a reporter with ProPublica. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's very nice to hear from you, sir. Thank you for taking the time. What did you look at with this data?
Well, this is, first of all, just our initial story using the data, but kind of what struck us when we were, looking at it the last several months was just how little tax, the richest Americans paid when you compared it to the vastness of their wealth. And so we undertook this piece to sort of demonstrate that, and it's getting at kind of one of the main key factors of the American tax system and a lot of others is that it taxes income and not wealth. So it literally doesn't matter how rich you are. It matters how much income you might have realized that year and what you put down in your tax return. And so you can understand that in the abstract, but then when you see, for instance, we have some 0 years from, people who are among the richest people in the world. So, Jeff Bezos in 2007 and 2011 paid 0 in federal income tax. And then in 2018, we have Elon Musk paying 0 in federal income tax. And the reason that can happen is because...
Zero.
And the reason that can happen is because, even if you're getting, billions richer every month, if you don't turn that into income, if you don't sell your stock, then it's not considered income. And so what you see on their tax returns often is essentially side investments. And if they're making a concerted effort not to realize income, then it's just not going to be there. And then that's how they can end up with, 0 years.
Right. It seems it's because their wealth is so closely tied to the value of the shares on the stock market. Would that be right, Paul? Amazon goes from whatever, $1,000 a share to $3,000 a share. So the fortune of Jeff Bezos triples, but maybe his salary is $1 million or something, so he pays very little.
No. Jeff Bezos pays himself $80,000 a year.
Oh, $80,000
And the reason that the reason that he's paid, that's not uncommon among CEOs in the U.S. And the reason is often it's framed in the press as, they really believe in the company. They're not even paying themselves a massive salary. But you have to look at it from a tax perspective. And, income wages here, particularly at a high level, are taxed at the highest rate, 37%. And wages are the thing that is actually the easiest to tax for the government, the most comprehensively taxed. We not only have income taxes, we have taxes for, our federal programs like Social Security and Medicare that you pay on top of your income taxes. So an average person will see a lot of tax on their wages. And, the examples we give in the piece are someone earning around $70,000 a year might, pay something like 14%. That's kind of what they look down at their paycheck. That's what's coming out. Whereas, for if you look just at income, the typical income tax for this group, we did the top 25 over 5 years, and their average was 16. It's around the same. We give examples of average people who might pay more, a lot more than that. People who are earning like $50,000 a year. But then if you go up the income scale, if you're someone who has a big salary here in the U.S., you're probably paying quite a lot of taxes because that's very easy to tax. So. A CEO like Jeff Bezos, he gets paid $80,000 a year. There are CEOs who take literally like $1 in salary. And again, that's framed as them believing in the company, but it also happens to be a way that you can much more efficiently avoid tax.
Yeah, so I want to revisit this issue, how this compares, say, the tax bill, because, and you've explained it nicely about Mr. Bezos, also Elon Musk, 0 years, right? They're not the only ones. With 0 income tax years. Michael Bloomberg, Carl Icahn, corporate raider, George Soros, the famed investor. No federal income tax, according to ProPublica, 3 years in a row. How does that compare to, say, some member of the middle class in the United States? How do these compare?
Yeah, well, like I said, if you earn wages, you don't have a 0 year. That doesn't make any sense. So George Soros said he had investment losses, and he's being careful in terms of how he realizes his wealth. He's kind of a different example from a Bezos or a Musk because he got rich, doing investing. Carl Icahn is still a very active investor. He actually, if you look at his tax returns, we say in the piece, he had over $500 million in income in these 2 years, but then here you're allowed to deduct interest that you use to invest. So essentially, he borrows an immense amount of money. We give an example in the piece that he has $1 billion loan from Bank of America here, secured in part by penthouse apartments and other properties that he owns. But essentially, like, he leverages himself. He borrows billions of dollars, and then he uses that money to do his investing. But then he goes to his taxes, he's able to deduct that interest, and so he ends up with zero in income, which results in zero in taxes for a couple of years. So that's a slightly different case than, someone like, we give Warren Buffett as an example. Warren Buffett isn't really doing anything fancy with his taxes. He simply, has built a company that's become massively successful. He's worth over $100 billion, but that company doesn't pay him dividends. So he owns a lot of stock. That's where his wealth comes from, but he's not getting income every year from that because he has the philosophy of avoiding dividends, believing that the money should go back in the company. He doesn't sell his stock. He holds. So when you look at his taxes, we say in the piece, there's one year where we can say that, 14,000 taxpayers had higher income than Warren Buffett that year, but it's not because he's doing badly. It's because when you look at his taxes, you're basically just seeing, side investments, a little, interest income he has and dividends. And, it's over $10 million. It's a lot for normal people, but it's not a lot for Warren Buffett.
Right. It's not illegal what they're doing, right? It's not tax evasion.
No, so the parlance in tax world is avoidance is legal and evasion is illegal, and we're not alleging that any of this is illegal. It's sort of the advice that any good accountant would give these guys to be wary of cashing in. And like I said, the broad strokes of this are understood among experts. That there has been some discussion of a wealth tax in recent years for these reasons, but we think to see the specifics of it has to change the way you think about how the system works.
Right. In fact, Jeff Bezos, wealthiest man in the world, founder of Amazon, actually reported a negative income one year and then claimed a tax credit for his children. Is that right?
Yeah, so the way the tax system works is it looks at how much income you had, and that year he had some investment losses. We don't really say what those are, but it's not related to Amazon, just side investments. Yeah. He ended up on the negative side of the balance sheet. So the tax system says, okay, you had no income. So now you qualify for these things that are designed for people who don't have income or have low income. And so one of them is a little extra tax credit for people who have children.
Okay. Good for him. Good for him. Okay. Incredible. It's incredible reporting. I encourage everyone to read it. And I have to say, the online presentation of it is very well done. It's quite something. It's eye-popping.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we took a lot of care in trying to write this in a way that anyone could read, because we sort of felt like, people, even though experts, as I said, understood this general dynamic, it's not something that I think most people understand. Yeah. And so we kind of thought of ourselves as explaining, to people how the system really works for the first time. So we took a lot of care with that.
And there will be more stories to come by the sounds of things from this report.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Paul Kiel, reporter with ProPublica. The secret IRS files. Trove of never-before-seen records reveal how the wealthiest avoid income tax. You should see some of that. They have a graphic there. I showed this to David this morning. We were scrolling through it. They have a graphic there that I believe it was median household income is about $120,000 in the United States. And that if you took that all in $1 American bills, it would be about, what was it? The size of a tennis court, right? About the size of a tennis court.
Standard tennis court.
Standard tennis court. And that if you took the $130 billion fortune of the Amazon founder, Jeff Bezos, it would take, and spread it out in $1 bills, it would take up all of New York City and most of New Jersey as well.
A lot of cash. A lot of cash.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos reporting negative income and a tax credit for his kids. Isn't that great? Wealthiest guy in the world. Okay. Yeah. Sure. 11:45, Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's such a beautiful feel because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
Pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
The Ottawa Mission food truck program continues to experience astounding growth in response to rising rates of hunger in Ottawa because of COVID-19. Usage of the program is up from 500 meals a week to 3,000 meals a week since last summer. Peter Tilley joins me this morning on City News. He's CEO of the Mission. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Rob. It's good to talk with you again.
Yeah. You know, when you hear about growth, it's usually a good news story. I don't know if this is really a good news story, Peter.
Yeah, this is the old, if you build it, they will come. And we saw early on in this pandemic the incidence of hunger. People stopping Chef Rick in the parking lot. Those first 2 weeks we were in absolute lockdown when we were all stunned and wondering where we were going, and we could only serve meals to our in-house residents. And of course, several people stopping Chef Rick, telling him they were literally starving, that they had lost the several meals a day they were getting from us, those who were coming in from the community. So we started doing takeout meals to the receiving dock, and that's growing. And then a few months after that, Jim Foster from Pelican Seafood and Grill donated a food truck to us, and it was one of those, what are we going to do with a food truck? We could do catering for events, but you know, Chef Rick and myself and our CFO Brian got around and discussed our options, and one of them from my food bank days, I remembered all these poor pockets of communities that must be out there in the city in need, and Chef Rick set it up so we could
deliver meals into the community. And we tried 5 stops at first, and that immediately others heard of it. City councillors would call us and talk about the need in their wards, and the next thing we're up to the point we're at now of 19 stops and 3,000 meals per day. So we're doing 2-3 stops per day, 7 days a week, getting out there to the different locations in Ottawa. I was just here.
Like 3,000 meals a week, Peter. 3,000 meals a week.
Unbelievable.
Right.
I was just here at Somerset West, Rob, and watching the people line up in the back parking lot of that community center. There's a gentleman who's blind and his friend who's brought him there, other people on walkers, people just truly distraught. And one gentleman I spoke to, Ron, he said how at the end of the month he has $400 left over after everything, and he said this really helps with his budget, that once a week he can go somewhere and know he's going to get a hot meal and a decent meal. He says it's been a great program, a great addition to his budget. So what we're doing is just meeting the need, and Chef Rick is just amazing, as you know, and coming up with this.
Why is there so much need, though, Peter? I look around Ottawa, and it's, this is the city of affluence. 19 stops across the city, 3,000 meals a week from one food truck, from the Ottawa Mission. What's happening on the ground? What are you hearing? What are some of the common factors that you're experiencing with this project?
Well,
you must be shocked by it. Are you shocked by it, Peter?
Oh, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I wonder, had we done this pre-pandemic, what the response would have been. Certainly during the pandemic, we've seen the need. I know a lot of access to resources, as we know, has been cut off. Places people may go normally to try and acquire resources, whether it's food, money, clothing. Mm-hmm. That's been closed down. A lot of the community centers were in lockdown. We'll see if things start opening up. So to put a truck preparing meals, healthy meals, and bring it into a community and watch people from the apartments nearby suddenly stream down and line up for assistance. People in wheelchairs. I've seen out at one of the last stops we were at that I went to a few months ago. It's very disheartening. So I'm not certain what's happening out there. But the other thing too, Rob, is we're wondering about the future. Like when this pandemic lifts, we hear in the news about the incidence of alcoholism, of depression, people calling the distress centers at unprecedented levels. Our concern is those people are probably close to their last resort, and that's usually what the shelters like the Mission, the Shepherds of Good Hope, Salvation Army, and Cornerstone are a place of refuge, of last resort. So we think our services are going to be needed more than ever before as we pull out of this pandemic. We have an active, engaged, abstinence-focused addictions program. Well, certainly, I think that's going to come into effect given what's happening out there in the community and regular residential neighborhoods.
Okay. Peter Tilley is with me. He is the CEO of the Ottawa Mission. 3,000 meals a week. I'm still... You started this program last year, summer 2020, 5 stops, 500 meals a week. 9 months later, you're at 19 stops, 3,000 meals a week. You keep mentioning Chef Rick Allen Watson. What is his day like then to do this?
He's just a miracle guy, as you know. You've known him for years. Rob, what a blessing for us to have him in our midst. I was there at the food truck. We had just pulled up, and we came out to start setting up to do some interviews, to do the news conference. Councillor McKinney was there, and of course, and we had Nani there, and Nani Cloutier, the executive director of Somerset West. And as we're there, one of the people who were lining up came over. Hey, Chef. He's a gentleman who used to be here at the Mission. He told me he's now housed over on the other side of the river. But he came up, hey, Chef,
glad to see you here in that. What's on the menu today? And Chef Rick right away responded, "Oh, it's turkey done this way and that with broccoli, etc." And I just thought, what a guy! Everything that's happening around us and the level he operates at, we're opening that new Chef Rick's expanded food services program, and he still knows what the menu is on the food truck today out there at Somerset West. So.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. But I mean, how for the mission itself? How do you even secure the foodstuffs to do 3,000 meals a week? How are you bringing that all together?
A lot of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say we've had a lot of the food industry partners stepping forward. A lot of our food industry partners are stepping forward, donating food at unprecedented levels. And again, first 2 months here, no, we can't take any donations, and we figured out how we could do so safely. And we were confident in the food supply that was coming in and the way we were handling it. So we've had a lot of food donations come in. Plus, we've had a great inpouring of public response over the past year, Rob. This is a great community. People have been donating resources, so we've been able to purchase food as well too, and hopefully that'll continue.
It's good to hear. I want to ask you just kind of about the seasonality of the clients of the Ottawa mission. Okay, we just went through this heat wave. In a couple of weeks it'll officially be summer, but the nice weather is here. The snow is gone. Then no more wind chill. All of this stuff. What does that mean about homelessness and those in a precarious situation right now in our community? What's been your experience when the summer is? Does demand for your services increase typically in, say, June, July, August, or does it go down? Can you give me a sense of that, Peter?
Sure. It's a great question, Rob, because again, because of the pandemic, all the shelters are in a physical distancing mode where our dorm rooms of 8 are dorm rooms of 4. We're cohorting people. We're making sure we're respecting physical distancing. So a lot of people have been moved on to the physical distancing isolation centers that the city was good enough to quickly react and set up with our partners at Inner City Health and Ottawa Public Health. So a lot of people have been moved there, but we still have people under our roof. But in the summer, very unfortunately, what we're seeing is people who would normally come inside, A, because of the restrictions on the number of people, and B, just because, this population of ours, they're survivors, and they've been in fear and anxiety over this COVID-19. Many of them have now been vaccinated, thanks to that initiative from the province and OPH, but they're still very wary.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.